Awesome. Thank you everybody for joining today. We'll just wait just a few seconds for the attendees to join and get settled as we start and launch our book talk. Perfect. Okay, we'll get started. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Kroom, Assistant Director for Post-Secondary Achievement and Innovation here at Ascend, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to Ascend in a virtual space. I lead the Aspen Post-Secondary Success for Parents Initiative, and our work is focused on the 4 million plus students who are parents enrolled in post-secondary pathways all across the country. I'm very honored and lucky here today. It's my total delight to launch our first PSP book talk, which features two amazing individuals. The first being Ascend Parent Advisor, Generation Hope Scholar, George Mason student, and founder of the Fatherhood Foundation, Ariel Ventura-Lazo, and also the CEO and founder of Generation Hope, Nicole Lynn Lewis. I'm currently speaking to you all today from Washington, D.C., on the ancestral land of the Piscataway and the Cochatonk tribes. If you'd like to learn more about the ancestral land on which you are living or working today, you can click on the link that we'll add to the chat right now. Thank you, Lexi. On to today's event. So as I mentioned, we're here for a book talk to talk about Nicole Lynn Lewis's book, which this is my copy right here, Pregnant Girl, A Story of Teen Motherhood, College, and Creating a Better Future for Young Families. It's a powerful novel that I happened to read last year in between two also amazing novels, Adam Harris's The State Must Provide and Clint Smith's How the Word is Passed. All three works showcase how systems that exist in our country were built to exclude certain populations. In the case of Nicole's work, she wrote a searing memoir indicting the higher education system in the ways that it excludes student parents, woven into and through was her own personal story, and also vignettes of amazing student parents through the work that she has launched and led at Generation Hope. One of those parents happens to be Ariel Ventura-Lazo. So when we decided to host this book talk for Nicole, it was pretty natural who we were going to ask to facilitate this conversation because of the great relationship and the work that she does with Ariel and others like him. Some housekeeping, we will and have already started to record this book talk, and we'll be sharing it on our website by early next week. We also have Q&A toward the end of this conversation, so I'll come back and do that Q&A and help facilitate that conversation among Ariel and Nicole. So please add any questions that you may have to the chat, or, which is probably the preference, the Q&A dialogue that exists here within Zoom. So if you wouldn't mind, and Ariel throughout, and Lexi also too, will continue to remind you all to add those questions to the Q&A dialogue. That way we can make sure to use the minutes that we have at the end to continue engaging in this really amazing, robust conversation. So along with that, I'm pleased to introduce my friends Ariel Ventura-Lazo and Nicole Lynn Lewis to join us in conversation. Again, I'll be back toward the end to facilitate Q&A. So let's launch into the conversation. So Ariel.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today as we welcome former teen mother, advocate, social activist, change agent, influencer, author, CNN, Shiro, college graduate, founder and CEO of Generation Hope, and mother of 5, Nicole Lynn Lewis. Nicole, it is an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you, Ariel. The honor is all mine, always. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things when I was invited to be a part of this, which I'm so honored to be, that I really wanted to tie in so that everybody can get that perspective, as David just kind of mentioned, is the relationship between Generation Hope and this scholar particularly, and the relationship that Nicole and I have had over the last 8 to 9 years, kind of. And I say 9 years because as you guys have been seeing on social media, I've been updating and posting and promoting this event because it's really near and dear to my heart. About 9 years ago, I was at a dead-end road. I felt like a perceived dead-end road. And I really didn't feel like I had anywhere to go, being a first generation American after high school, working a glass ceiling job, which I had hit the glass ceiling a long time before I met Nicole. And, I felt like I was out of options. And my partner at the time was, she had just graduated high school. She was a teen mother. And thankfully, you guys crossed paths, Generation Hope and my partner. And that's how I I dove in headfirst into Generation Hope. Every time I would be there in presence for trainings, for workshops, for big events, for seminars, just every little thing that student parents, really just students in general, but student parents, the tools that they need to really make it ahead in post-secondary education. And I remember Nicole planting a seed 9 years ago. We want you to be a father in our program. We want you to be a father in one of the first fathers of the program. I was the first of 3 fathers in the program, which was just, I didn't know how big of a milestone that was going to be in my life. And I just thank you, Nicole, so much for everything that you've done. I want to go ahead and put that out there, from advocating at Generation Hope to advocating on Capitol Hill with you. This is a true honor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And let me just say that you're leaving out a really important part, which is that once you came into our program, you started at Northern Virginia Community College and totally knocked it out of the water, like total rock star. I think had like 4.0 semesters. And so we just are so thrilled that you're a part of the Generation Hope family. And I couldn't be more excited to be in conversation with you today.
Absolutely. And let's go ahead and dive in so we can really get to the meat and bones of what we're here for today.
Yeah.
Your book. Let's jump into the conversation. By the way, everybody, we all know why we're here for today. Pregnant Girl, a story of teen motherhood, college, and creating a better future for young families. In telling your story in the book, Nicole, it's clear that every day you were just trying to get through the next 24 hours. If one thing went wrong, it would ruin an already delicate and fragile balance. One thing that I know I can attest to, we all have personal experience. My personal experience that I really want to highlight was that day on Capitol Hill when we went to go advocate on Capitol Hill. That was probably one of the toughest days where, as you have been through many times before, where you don't know what's going to keep you going through the day because coffee just isn't enough. Mm-hmm. And from, waking up early in, break of dawn, early mornings, getting the children ready, dropping them off to their respective locations. My daughter at the time was at daycare. My son was in, I believe, the 3rd grade. So 2 different locations from, opposite ends of the town. My car was holding on to, it was barely holding on. Right. As the Generation Hope emergency funding grant knows, it was barely on. And getting to their respective locations, getting to my job, getting to school for class, and then in reverse, picking up the kids, and then, having all of these things on top of the pressure of day-to-day responsibilities and tasks that we all have to keep up with, right? On top of keeping our sanity, our mental health, so that we can be good for ourselves, so we can be good for our children and families as well, and we can produce work. It's already a very delicate balance. How do the experiences of student parents today differ from your experiences 20 years ago, in your opinion? Secondly, I want to go ahead and add to that, but we can go ahead and retouch on this in a little bit. Are more colleges doing more for student parents?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you shared that story. And I think also it's just a reminder of how we never know what's happening, in the lives of different people, because, you showed up that day, you did such an amazing job sharing your story, and probably people had no idea, how tough that day was for you, just to make sure that you could do drop off and pick up. And, it's just a reminder to check in on how we're all doing. And so I appreciate you showing up that day and sharing your story, even with everything you had going on. Just to take a step back, so I started college with a 3-month-old baby. I was, a teen mom, I got pregnant my senior year of high school, and I was on the college track when I found out I was expecting. And this rock star student, I had this stack of college acceptance letters on one side of my desk and a positive pregnancy test on the other. I didn't know how those two things were going to come together. I had no role models for how I was going to go to school with a baby. You know, most girls in that situation, they disappeared, they dropped out of school. You might see them working in retail or something like that, but you didn't see them on a college campus. So it was very much uncharted territory for me. And at the same time, there was this tension between not seeing it, not knowing if it was possible, but then also knowing that getting my education was probably the key to my survival and my daughter's survival and our family. And so, you know, that was a really difficult thing. And I persevered through the pregnancy, through a really turbulent relationship with her father. We were homeless and sleeping in the high school parking lot sometimes. Sometimes we didn't have food to eat. He was selling drugs. Nothing about my life said college. And I held on to this hope, you know, that I could actually step foot on a college campus. And when I found out I had been accepted into William and Mary, I was 8 months pregnant and living day to day in a Motel 6. So not at all, you know, the student they probably pictured on the other end of that acceptance letter. And so it was incredibly hard. I mean, as soon as I stepped foot on campus, getting to campus was just hard enough, you know, because I was living day to day in just a totally different world. I talk in the book about how I was only an hour away from William and Mary's campus, but it felt like I needed a rocket ship to get there because my life was so different. The hurdles were so significant. And so when I started at William and Mary, I just felt like I didn't belong. You know, I looked at my feet and thought they don't belong here. I was one of very few Black students at William and Mary. I was, you know, an anomaly as a parenting student, as a mother. I didn't have money for tuition and books, and they didn't even know where to put me on my first day of classes orientation. They kind of lumped me into a group with transfer students, which I wasn't. You know, I was a freshman. So I had to kind of find my way on a college campus, which I think we all can attest to how difficult it is to find anything on a college campus. But definitely when you don't have an RA or a guide or somebody, I just had my map and I had to figure it out all on my own. I share all of that because I wish I could tell you that so much of that is different now for parenting college students. But the reality is that it's not. I think, you know, the students that we work with today will tell you that they often feel out of place on a college campus. They don't feel like there are lifelines of people who understand what they're going through and they can talk to. They don't have a good sense of whether or not there are systems and supports in place for them to succeed. And many times there aren't, you know, systems and supports in place. I think, you know, there are some things that have changed since I was in college. The cost of college has skyrocketed. I think there's a very good question about whether or not I would have been able to go to William and Mary and graduate if I was paying the tuition that you know, students are required to pay today. Childcare, the cost of childcare has skyrocketed. So in many ways, things have changed for the worst in terms of, you know, whether college is a realistic, viable option for student parents. On the flip side of that, I mean, just the fact that we're here today, that Ascend exists, you know, that we have this incredible network of people all across the country who are invested in families and invested in education and post-secondary education for parents. I mean, that's huge. And there's a hashtag today, right? There's a lot of work in terms of what needs to be done for student parents, but there's an awareness and a momentum building that definitely wasn't in place when I was going to school, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got a plethora of information there from you, valuable data right there. And one of the couple of things that I heard that's true to this day is you still really don't see that role model as much as we believe we should nowadays. And I do recall at one of the trainings, one of the other scholars mentioned, we don't see enough of that on campus. So it doesn't give me that candlelight. It doesn't give me that hope that I need to keep going. It doesn't give me that drive. And one of the other things that I heard too was, you have to work harder than your counterparts. You oftentimes 2, 3, and maybe even 4 times as hard sometimes just to make it. And that's one of the things as a student parent, we take that all in stride. We just roll with the punches. It's sometimes what it feels like. But yeah, that end goal is always going to be there. The next question I wanted to move on to, Nicole, as far as your book, in your view, what are some of the key differences between the perceptions of student mothers and fathers? How do those differences impact their experiences both on and off campus?
Yeah, we have always, since our inception, served both mothers and fathers. And that was why when we met you, we were so excited to say, Ariel, apply to this program. Because, for us, we're invested in the success of a family, and we're invested in the success of both parents. I think the perception of fathers, and this goes for teen fathers, it goes for student fathers, is that they are not engaged, they are not involved. They are really, we talk about the student parent population being invisible. I think, fathers in college are even more so in the shadows. And that has a lot to do with the negative stereotypes that we have about, fathers, especially fathers of color, the stigma and the stereotypes of them being disengaged and from both their education and from their families. That's wrapped up in racial bias. It's wrapped up in class and poverty and a lot of different things. And I think, for us at Generation Hope, we feel it's incredibly important to elevate the experiences of our fathers, to really provide them a platform to share their journeys and to talk about how invested they are in their education, how invested they are in their children. I mean, I'm always bragging about the dads in our program because I think you all prove every single day all of that, that stuff wrong. But we have to, I think, collectively really commit to doing that on a larger scale. And that's one of the reasons it was really important for me to have your story in the book. Joseph is another young father that is featured in the book, because for me, that's such a huge piece of this. I wouldn't have felt complete, like this book wouldn't have been complete without making sure that fathers and their perspectives are shared and are a part of this. If we're really invested in economic mobility for families, then we have to prioritize both mothers and fathers in that work.
Awesome. I love the way you share that, because going back to your book, I think in the process of you creating your book, we had a call from my people, and I don't know if you remember, but I broke down crying for a good.
I do. I thought about that today. Yes.
You had asked me it was a very simple question, for anybody, but for me, it just kind of triggered what possibly could have been trauma, what have you. And, I remember, just reaching those dark places and dark days that I've been at as to why I'm doing what I'm doing as a father. It's for my children. And like I said, I do remember breaking down crying for a good while. But as you said, we have to portray the fathers. We got to shine some of the light on fathers as well, too. This is all in all-inclusive, very important mission that we're all on. And one of the stats that I did want to share, as I encourage people to drop into questions in the Q&A, in the dialogue. Generation Hope scholars, parenting students, graduate at a 62% rate, double the rates of low-income students, 8 times the rate of single mothers nationwide, and it exceeds graduation rates of all college students nationwide. This is really awesome. This is awesome what you're doing, what you have already done, Nicole, and what you continue doing. Once again, I want to remind the audience to go ahead and drop in any Q&A that you have, whatever's on your mind, drop it in the Q&A, and we'll get to those. We have a dedicated time for that towards the end. In the book, you shared a story of a professor who wasn't really sympathetic to your situation, a professor who made you bring your sick child to class. And, as far as the differences that I have personally seen is currently right now, when I was at the community college level, there were all these services at the time that I went there set in place for non-traditional students to succeed, paired with Generation Hope support and the team and the mentorship and the financial piece and everything. I felt like I had a village behind me when I decided to step foot back on a college campus after 5 years. I felt like I had the right people in my corner, which I did ultimately. But what are some of the programs and policies that colleges and universities have initiated in the recent past to better support student parents who are juggling their parenting responsibilities, coursework, and more?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really encouraged by what we're seeing coming from higher ed institutions. I think the pandemic has accelerated some of this work because I think it's laid bare the fact that, too many students were falling through the cracks prior to COVID-19, and that if we're really going to come out of this stronger, we're going to need to innovate and do things differently. And I know I'm not the first person to say this, but a return to normal for many people, including parenting students, is a painful place to be. So we don't want to return to normal. We want to do things differently coming out of this. And I've seen really wonderful things. Everett Community College in Washington, for example, stood up a program for weekend college, for parenting students who don't have the flexibility in their schedules to be able to go and attend class from 9 to 5, for example, are able to go on a Saturday or a Sunday and get the courses that they need. We've seen Trinity Washington University and Montgomery College. These are two colleges that are in our Family U Technical Assistance Program. They paid off student debts at their institution, student balances, so that they could, clear those costs. And we know that many of the students who carry those balances are parenting college students, and they are preventing them from being able to either advance in their coursework or from being able to pay for other things that are so significant, right? That we know the costs of going to college are much more for parenting college students than other students. So we've seen a lot of really encouraging things. I think the name of the game is flexibility. We have seen some of our scholars really thrive in a virtual setting. And of course, it cuts down on commute time. And as you and I both know, putting gas in the car and, paying for car repairs, going to being able to attend classes virtually, solves for many of those things. But we've also seen some of our students who are like, I don't do well academically in a virtual setting, and I need to be in a classroom, and I need to be in community with people in person. And so I don't think there's a magic wand, right? I think what we are encouraging institutions to do is to create flexible environments that really meet each student where they are. And I think particularly for parenting students, not making the assumption that, everyone's going to love a virtual setting or everyone's going to love asynchronous classes. We want to see flexibility, and we want to see institutions engaging students in those conversations about what they need.
Awesome. And what I picked up from that was that it cannot just be an external effort from the student and their support group. It has to be an internal effort as well too, from the campuses and universities all across the nation as well too. So a collaborative and joint effort is really what it sounds like. So we know from Ascen's work with the JED Foundation that student parents face extreme stress, including high rates of basic needs insecurity, higher rates of trauma, and much less a sense of belonging on campus, as you mentioned, than our non-parenting counterparts. In your experiences and the experiences of other Generation Hope scholars, what have you found to be the most important supports to address the mental health needs of student parents?
Yeah, so I think, again, the pandemic has really increase the attention on mental health for all college students. I'm really encouraged by the focus on parenting students within that population, because we do know that they have higher rates of mental health needs or challenges. And so, it's great to see that these conversations are happening. I think when we're thinking about institutions and their ability to show up for students in this moment, one of the big things that we found at Generation Hope is, how do you create environments where students trust, and that trust is built up to where they can reach out when they have a mental health challenge. That was something early on that we realized. We thought, oh, okay, many of the institutions that our scholars are attending have mental health supports on their campuses. So if a scholar is dealing with a mental health challenge, we can point them in the direction of their school. What we found is that, for many of them, they didn't feel comfortable trying to access those mental health supports on a college campus. That environment historically had not been an environment that valued them, validated them, recognized them. Many of them didn't even feel comfortable sharing that they had children, with people working at an institution. So it was a big ask to say, now we want you to go and connect with this mental health center on campus regarding, your mental health challenge, which is a very private, thing. So what we decided to do is to bring those supports on staff at Generation Hope. So now we have a licensed counselor on our staff who can meet with both parent and child. And it's been a game changer, because that work has already been done. We've already built the relationships up with our students. The trust is already there. They feel safe disclosing, what's going on in their lives. So I think the big takeaway there is that it's wonderful to have mental health supports on campus. It's great to invest in those things. But the other piece of that is really critical is, how do you create campus environments and organizational environments that are safe, and where students and families have the trust. And I think, unfortunately, there are so many systems, so many organizations that have really treated families poorly. They've been punitive. They have created unnecessary barriers. You have to perform your poverty, like all sorts of things that, the last thing I want to do is tell you that I'm having this mental health challenge, right? So it's not only the investments, it's not only the infrastructure, but it's also the work that you have to do as an organization to build a culture where people feel safe and they feel like they can trust. And I think that's the piece that gets less talked about.
Absolutely. And as we all know, mental health is important. If we're not good in here, we cannot be good out there.
Yeah.
I do want to remind the audience, go ahead and dump your questions in. As I said before, we will have a dedicated time towards the end for Q&A for Nicole Lynn Lewis. Also, I wanted to just kind of jump into the next question, pivoting towards this experience that I had with the pandemic, my personal experience. We all had one heck of a pandemic, right? And this is geared for the next question. The shift to remote learning during the pandemic highlighted digital disparities, leaving many students, especially student parents, without access to reliable internet, laptops, and other important technology. And I know in a bunch of the other scholars of Generation Hope and among the other student parents across the nation as well too, it's been one heck of a pandemic for all of us. And I do recall being on campus for my classes for that semester, because I am that person that you mentioned. I need to be in the classroom. I'm a kinesthetic learner, where I learn by seeing and doing and actually doing it in front of somebody. So when we transitioned, when George Mason University and all the colleges and universities said, hey, we're sorry, but the pandemic going on, you're gonna have to stay home and learn from there going forward. And for the student parents, this was a tragedy. For some of us, for others that were well adapted already and were already doing so, it's a whole nother story. But for some of us student parents, and a lot of us who have children at home, who we have so many reasons why we go to the college campus, right? My reason is because it's the only place I can really focus. My kids are at home. And my 5-year-old daughter constantly needs a PB&J. She needs me to open her little Kool-Aid pouches and stuff like that. And all these little things that at the end of the day, combined to really much nothing getting done. And, my son is there too, needing things here and there. He's more independent, but, the saying is true, right? It's a lot harder to navigate with your children right there. And that was my reason for being in the classroom, because I learned differently. And because, the distractions at home were not conducive to my success. It was not a learning environment for me at all. And as well as we all had to become PE teachers, math teachers, right? For our children at home throughout those 7 to 8 hour days of school where they were online for 6 to 8 hours a day. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that they also probably aren't getting it all the way either, just as I am not. So the question goes, how have you seen the issue meaningfully addressed to post-secondary institutions in regards to the digital disparities that left many students, especially student parents, out of the picture?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the institutions that responded quickly and were able to provide, equipment, laptops, things like that to students are the ones who were able to get ahead of this and who were really able to show up for their students in that moment. What people don't often think about for parenting students is that, many of them, not only did their classes go remote, but as you said, they're children's classes. And so if you have one laptop for your family, you have to decide whether or not I'm going to use it for my coursework or for my children's coursework. And that's a really tough decision. Whereas maybe your little one, didn't really need to use your laptop before. Now they're home all day. They're on the computer. They need to be on the computer. And many school systems similarly struggle to get equipment to, K through 12 systems struggle to get equipment in the hands of families. Like I know for even for my children, that was a very slow process to even get laptops to people quickly. So, everything is multiplied when you're a parent. The needs of technology, the needs of food, the needs of, you need more space in your home. And so I think that many of the responses that institutions put in place were really catered to students who didn't have children, students who didn't have to provide a laptop to a child who, is also now working and doing classwork from home. One of my favorite stories is I was talking to an institution who, they were providing Wi-Fi in their parking lots during the pandemic. And that was a really, I think, creative solution. But I was, quick to remind them that if you're a parenting student, it's hard for you to sit in a parking lot in a car for hours to get your work done with 2 toddlers in the back seat, right? Like they want that PB&J, they want that that sippy cup. I mean, they don't care, right? They want what they want and they need it. They need that. And so that was the first time for this institution that they really were like, oh my gosh, like that wasn't something at all that they thought about. So I think the institutions that have really been able to serve student parents in this moment have been those that have looked at this, these supports through a student parent lens and really asked themselves, how does this impact a caregiver? How does this impact someone who may have 2 toddlers that would have to sit in the parking lot for hours? Or, we're giving this laptop, we're not sure if they have Wi-Fi at home. We need to ask also, do they need a hotspot? We need to ask if they are sharing a device. I mean, all of those questions are really important. And that's why, what we encourage institutions to do is look at everything that you do through a student parent lens, as opposed to kind of thinking of it as a niche program or one office or one department. It's your financial aid. It's making sure your students have the technology that they need. It's aligning your school closures with the, for snow with the public school closures so that parents don't have to scramble to get to class with no childcare. These are all of the things that we really encourage institutions to do is to look at everything you do through that lens so that you can make sure that you're considering the needs of parenting students. And by doing that, everybody benefits. An environment that really thinks about its caregivers is going to be a wonderful environment for any student, whether you're a parent or not.
Absolutely. And there are so many things that even us as student parents don't know that we need until we actually get there.
Yeah.
Not to mention colleges and universities, things that they don't know that we need until we actually bring it to their attention. And then at that point, we have to fight and advocate for it and try to make it into institutional policy. And all of that takes time, and it's just a ripple effect going forward.
Mhm.
And one of the other things I really wanted to touch on as well, too, is time poverty at home. Now that we have to do schoolwork at home, that kind of throws off the day and the flow and rhythm of things at home, too, when you're with the children.
Yeah.
You're time poverty at this point. Not only are you poverty, now you're broke with time, too.
Right. Right, exactly. No, it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
It is. It sure is. You write in this book, I want to pivot because this is a perfect segue right here. You write in the book about the racist systems and policies that keep parents of color from entering and graduating college. The pandemic has provided an opportunity to reimagine and rebuild our systems to better serve these students. What are top 3 policy and system changes that you hope to see policymakers, service providers, and advocates implement in the next few years?
I think we absolutely have to look at higher ed affordability and accessibility. What we've seen in the pandemic is that the people who have suffered the most are those folks who don't have a post-secondary credential. And I think, for many of those people, there's probably a desire to go to college, to earn some sort of credential that will allow them to create economic mobility for their families. But it feels like a very unrealistic prospect. And that's a problem, when higher education is completely out of grasp for too many people. And that's the reality that we have today. And I think particularly if you're a parent, you're already feeling like this is not, the higher ed system wasn't designed for me. But then on top of that, I don't have the money to go to college. We do a lot of outreach at Generation Hope, where we're going into schools, we're going into other nonprofits, homeless shelters, social service agencies, and we're trying to find young parents and talking to them about the importance of just considering college as a viable option. We're often doing a lot of discussion around college affordability. And I think if we're going to, again, come out of this stronger, we have to work on making sure that there are supports in place to make college a real prospect for parents in particular, but for all people. Anybody who wants to go to college should have the opportunity to go to college and should feel like it's a realistic option for them. Childcare is huge. I mean, it's probably one of the most formidable obstacles for parenting college students. And I think universal pre-K and subsidized childcare programs are going to be paramount for making sure that this population is able to not only get on a college campus, but to get through. When you have your childcare interrupted because you can't afford it anymore, that was the case for me by my senior year in college. I couldn't pay the tuition anymore. I was taking my kids to my daughter to a childcare center on campus that was mostly being used by the college professors. I was paying $800 a month, 20 years ago. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And I was at my senior year. I was so close to graduation. I was on the dean's list. I was writing an honors thesis. I was student teaching at a high school. On paper, I shouldn't have been worried about graduating, but I was, because I could no longer afford childcare. And it wasn't until I was able to enroll my daughter into a Head Start program, and my bill went from $800 a month to $25 a month, that I felt like I could breathe. And that, okay, maybe I am going to make it to the finish line. And unfortunately, for too many, families across this country, they can't breathe. They can't focus on their goals and what they are, hoping to do, going to college, working a different job, because how do you afford childcare? And we see it every day with the students that we serve directly. We see it every day with student parents across the country. Childcare was a mess before COVID-19, and it's just the virus and its impacts have really just shed a light on that. So affordable childcare is key. And then I think the other thing is, do we have real pathways for economic mobility? And And one of the focus areas that we're hoping for in that economic mobility work is to really look at single mothers and to look at fathers. Those are two populations that really need true pathways to economic mobility. And so that's something that we're going to be focusing on and fighting for at Generation Hope.
Awesome. I love to hear it. I love to hear it, Nicole. One of the things that I definitely picked up on that I really kind of want to highlight, I want to make sure that the audience and the viewers right now really highlight is the fact that you said your childcare subsidy went from 800 to how much was it?
$25.
$25.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we have those outer voices saying, you got to pick yourself up from the bootstraps. You got to make something of yourself. You have to really just hang in there and work hard. But a lot of the times they fail to see that us student parents, and just students in general as well too, but student parents particularly, the 1 in 5, right, are only going to be as successful as the systems that are set in place and the policies that are on campus and in social services and family services. We're only as successful as those systems and policies allow us to be. And that's one of those things that when you said that the bill went from $800 to $25, whenever we are considering an upward mobility job, we're kind of wedged in a very weird place where we can rely on the government benefits to kind of help us through and allow us to seek economic mobility to move upwards, or we can take a $40,000 to $50,000 a year job where we will lose all those benefits and we will be living under the poverty line in which we didn't do anything. And
exactly,
now
that cliff effect. Yeah.
That particularly is something I really wanted to highlight, because we've all dealt and balanced that and tried to finesse it, or for lack of a better words, to move up. And it's not so much, I don't feel that people don't want to do better. It's that the systems just aren't good.
Yeah, no, I think we have to, to your point, we have to look at these systems and we have to challenge them, and we have to push back. And I think, we have to name the fact that some of these systems were, as David pointed out in the beginning, they were designed to exclude and oppress. And that's a real thing. And because those systems have been in place for so long, people accept those exclusions and those oppressions as normal and as acceptable, and they're not. And so I think that the job that we all have is to kind of peel back the onion and help people to see the ways that these policies continue to oppress, who they're oppressing, and really shed light on that. And those can be difficult conversations, but we have to be willing to have those difficult conversations and to speak truth. That's the job that I think we all have doing this work.
Absolutely. So as we're wrapping up here, I did want to ask you, one last question to kind of close us out here, as far as this book talk and you sharing all these gems from your book, all these golden nuggets from your book. I did ask you earlier today, I don't know if you remember, did you think that, you would take that Generation Hope would go as far as it did? And don't answer just yet, because I want to ask this question. In looking back on your experiences in the book that led you to where you are now, what kept you motivated? What do you hope readers take away from reading about your experience and the experiences of other student parents in Pregnant Girl?
I do remember you asking me that question, and I'm gonna share my answer exactly as I shared it. When I was in college, I wanted a job that would pay for groceries, pay for childcare, put gas in my car, and hopefully get me a car that didn't have a constant oil leak. That was my bar for a job after college.
That was your definition of success. That was your
yes, that's right. Diapers, like basic needs. I never considered myself or saw myself as leading an organization one day. Seeing CEO by my name, never would have guessed that, never would have thought that. And so it's definitely exceeded, any expectations that I had for myself. And certainly I think when I started Generation Hope, it came from a frustration that it didn't already exist in the world. And so, for me, this has been a calling, growing this organization and launching this organization. And I've been just amazed along the way of everything that we've been able to accomplish. And I have to say we have a phenomenal team, right? Like, you know, our staff, you know, our team. I have been so blessed and fortunate to have just incredible people who have helped to take this vision farther, right, than I could have ever imagined. And so I'm just incredibly thankful for that. I think what kept me motivated is what keeps, I think, so many parenting students motivated. I had this beautiful little girl named Narissa who, you know, every day looked at me, and I was the world to her. And I was going to save the day. And I just wanted her to have everything that she deserved in life. And I knew that in order for me to do that, to provide her with that, I had to have that degree. There was no plan B. There was no, you know, fallback career that I had. This was it. It was everything. I had all of my eggs in that basket. And there were many days where I wanted to give up and say, I can't do this anymore, or I cried myself to sleep, or I couldn't figure out how to pay rent or childcare or food. But I knew that she was depending on me, and I had to do everything in my power to make sure that she had what she needed in life. She is now a senior in college herself. And so, you know, I'm really happy to say that it pays off. Stay the course. It does, you know, that 2-gen work really does work. And I think in terms of what I hope people take away, 2 things. I think I'm hoping that people read Pregnant Girl, close it, and say, I want to do something about this. And I hope that they recognize that no matter what position you're in, whether you're an educator, whether you're a public official, whether you are a neighbor, you know, a fellow church member, all of us are gatekeepers. All of us have some ability to remove barriers for others. And there's something each of us can do, even if it's just in a conversation where someone says something judgmental about teen mothers or teen fathers. All of us have the opportunity to say, let's reframe that. Let me tell you a little bit about what I've learned on this issue. Or if you are an administrator at a college, including language in your syllabus that really communicates to parents in your classroom that they're welcome, right? There's something all of us can do. And the reality is we're all going to have to do something to create large scale change. It's not going to be on the shoulders of 1 or 2 people. It's going to take all of us, no matter what position we're in, to do something. The last thing I'm hoping is that if a teen parent reads this book, a single mother, anyone who's been impacted by teen pregnancy, anyone who's had to juggle parenting and going to college or going to high school, I just hope that it honors their journeys, and I hope that they walk away feeling like they're enough, because there were so many times that I felt like I wasn't enough, and I'm hoping that it just communicates in that moment to people that you are enough. You can do anything you set your mind to. There's a whole group of people who are rooting for you, and me being one of them. And, you know, go out there and change the world, and we're all cheering for you.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing that with us. I totally appreciate you. We totally appreciate you. And also, thank you so much for creating a platform for all of us student parents, you know, to have our voices heard. We are forever in your debt. And I want to just close out with what you said. We don't want to return to normal. We do not want to return to normal, right? And Pregnant Girl, guys, it's out now. We're going to shift over now to David for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Ariel. You did amazing, as I knew you would.
So I don't know why he's leaving.
Don't leave.
Questions are for him too. So with our remaining almost 10 minutes left, I'm going to jump right into questions because there's some great questions that came through.
Oh, good.
So the first question, which I thought was really amazing, from Russell Laurie Hart, our colleague and president over at Amarillo College in Texas. Who was your person within your higher education institution or institutions? The person whom you connected with, that supported and loved you. How did you find that person, if you had one? So
That's
within your
great
college, who was the
question.
person that really supported you within your institutions to success?
Yeah. So for me, my person was my financial aid counselor, a woman named Tammy Curry. She was just a wonderful support, and talk about a gatekeeper, talk about someone who you want to make friends with if you're a parenting college student. She was really wonderful in helping me to get classified as an independent student even before I stepped foot on campus. So, you know, being able to be an independent student meant that I could get the funds that I needed to go to William and Mary. And when I applied, I was pregnant. So I wasn't initially an independent student. And so even just with several phone calls, she immediately kind of jumped on that, really cared about my situation, worked hard to you know, get all the paperwork processed, but over the years continued to be a lifeline for me. So she was really wonderful when I decided I was in an abusive relationship, and I ended up moving out and living, trying to get a place on my own for my sophomore year. And she was helpful in trying to help make that happen. You know, I wasn't able to take part fully in the campus experience, but I think having somebody like Tammy in a position where she could really do something to help made a big difference for me as a college student. And I've connected with her. We've reconnected. So funny. She works at Northern Virginia Community College. Dr. Ann Kress is on my board at Generation Hope. And she assigned Pregnant Girl as required reading for her kind of chief leadership team. That one of those chief people was Tammy's boss and said, Tammy, I think you're in a book. I just read about you. And so that's how Tammy and I reconnected, because she doesn't work at William & Mary and I couldn't find her. And she reached out to me and I was like almost in tears. So 20 years later, Tammy and I have reconnected. And so she's just amazing. I'm sorry. So Ariel, who is your person?
That's amazing. So fortunately for me, because of where we are with student parents advocacy now, I didn't just have a person. I had a whole team inside the institution. At the time, I proudly boast this all the time. I am probably the most benefited student father that was at Nova. I benefited from literally everything that was set in place for me to succeed, and I took advantage of every single thing. So my persons were Karen Hilker Balkasoon. Oh, she believed in me. That's probably why I'm here where I'm at today. Jennifer Pakai, who is joining.
Joining Ascend.
Jennifer Pakai was joining Ascend, which I got the news of that, caught wind of that not too long ago. I was just, you know, I couldn't be happier. You know, there are several other people that currently right now. Those are two of the key people that really just pushed me forward. And also at the very beginning, Jolene was. She believed in the mission. It was at the time when I was incepted into Generation Hope in 2014. I was debating of joining the United States Postal Service at $15 an hour versus a work study job at $10 an hour. And of course, you know, my mind went for the USPS job, which I would have probably still been at to this day. And I said, let me opt for the work study, for the flexibility, not for the money. And Jolene was there every step of the way, just pushing me and encouraging me, seeing the vision of a student father that many just didn't see.
Another question, which you kind of tapped on, this probably more so for Nicole, but we had a question here around, what does your two-generation approach look like? And how do you ensure that children are prepared for kindergarten? And do you support older children in the family? So wanted you to unpack that, because Gen Hope does have a two-gen sort of component to it.
So we have a program called Next Generation Academy that we launched about 3 years ago, and Ariel and his family have been a part of Next Gen. So, and one of the things we recognized in our scholar program over the years was that we had the children of our scholars engaged with us, especially during that early childhood phase, that critical early childhood phase, but we weren't intentionally providing programming and supports. And we had this opportunity to really formalize our two-gen model by really providing these targeted services and supports to our families that would simultaneously help a parent get their college degree and their child get ready for kindergarten. So we piloted that program, and we were able to see, we did about a year in person, and then of course COVID came and we had to shift to virtual for the second and third year. It's a home visiting model. So we use a parents as teachers curriculum. It fits really organically into our case management model on the scholar program side. So it was a nice marriage of the two programs that hopefully for our parents felt like it fit well with how we were already engaging with them. We bring brand new books into the home. We help to build their home libraries. We do activities that help the little ones build their skills. We set goals with the parents around their cognitive, social, emotional, and motor skills development. And then, parents really take the lead in helping their kids kind of reach those milestones. We have monthly parenting groups where parents work together to solve parenting challenges. We provide access to high quality childcare through a monthly stipend. And we also increase their social capital. So all of those things are kind of a part of our early childhood program. We, at the conclusion of our pilot, we asked our families, how can we make this program better? And one of the things they talked about was we'd love to be able to have these supports for our older kids who are already in elementary school. And so that's the way that we've expanded the program. So it initially started with our 1 to 3 year olds. Now we serve really from birth all the way up to, I think, 7. And once we have another 3 years with the program, we'll continue to ask our parents for ways that we can improve it.
Awesome. One other question I thought that was so interesting, and I want you both to answer this actually, because this is a book talk. So I thought this is like a really great book talk. Question is, what are your top 3, and you can name 1 to 3, non-fictional books that have helped you get to where you are and why?
Wow. You want to go first, Ariel? You want me to go first?
I got one. Right
Yeah,
now.
sure.
There's one right now that I'm currently finishing up is No Excuses. Yeah, that I forget the author's name by memory, but it just really is a book of self-discipline. And so that's my top 1 right now. I'll think of the other 2.
I love that. Gosh, there's so many books. One book that I loved and read I read 2 books right before I wrote Pregnant Girl. One is Educated by Tara Westover. The second is When They Call You a Terrorist by Patrice Kahn-Cullors. And then one book that I am diving into right now, our COO, Reginald M. Grant, is a Brene Brown fanatic, and I'm reading Dare to Lead. And I'm also listening to her podcast, and it's really, I think, timely because it's all about courageous leadership, with vulnerability being kind of the biggest aspect of courageous leadership. And I think in this moment, with this pandemic, that vulnerability is what we need more of. When we look at our leaders, we need more of that transparency, that human connection, that vulnerability. And really that's at the core of Pregnant Girl. That's one of the big questions I get. People read the book and they're like, why were you so vulnerable? And how did you, feel about sharing your story? And I think vulnerability is where connection comes from. And that's really what makes people courageous. And so I'm diving into Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. There's probably other books I like. I have so many books. I was an English major, so I could spend the whole next hour telling you about books that shaped me. But those are the 3 most recent.
Awesome. We have so many great questions. What we have done in the past, and we'll do this again, is share the questions that we're able to get to with Nicole and Ariel, and just create a little blog post that will, so you all, they can answer, since we weren't able to get to all of them. But I just want to say again, thank you both for this conversation. It made so much sense, and even having seen it now, it's just like, yeah, of course.
Yes.
One of the Generation Hope scholars, and Ariel in particular, must be in conversation with Nicole to talk about this book. I mean, this is truly, he's featured in the books, to say the least. So I also know that Lexi shared in the chat episode of our podcast, the 1 in 5 podcast that features Ariel and his story. So I wanted to just highlight that and say, if you're interested in learning more about this guy next to me, please listen to the podcast. It's a really great resource. And please listen to the other podcasts as well. They're really amazing. So just want to say thank you all for joining, and we'll be sure to share this, the video and the recording of this next week. So just check our social, make sure it's on there. But otherwise, thank you again, and have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Bye.